So yeah, here we are, scaling sales for Bootstrap startups. So a quick agenda, go through some brief introduction material, and then there's kind of four main sections to the presentation. Starting with founder-led sales, things that we've tried to scale sales. We'll take a short break at some point, take a bio break of some sort. Talk about some preconditions for when you would be ready to hire for sales, and then talk about recent hiring that we just did over the last couple months. So introductory wise, my name is Chad. I'm self-taught technology person. Been programming my whole life. Software development is kind of my passion, but I always, when I started my career, I realized the opportunity for tying technology to actual business results. So that's kind of my main thing that I've done my whole career is figure out how to take deep technology knowledge and communicate that to the business to understand how that can impact business results. But I am self-taught. All of the stuff in this presentation is based on my own experience, my own learnings. I'm not I've never done this presentation before. I'm not a sales trainer. This is all just going to be pretty authentic, transparent, sharing what we've done, sharing what I've learned, sharing some thoughts, some ideas about ways to think about things. So a lot of it will be very specific to my experience at Fotaflo, but I'm hoping that you can pull out a few nuggets of things to help you along your way. I've been working a long time, which seems weird to me. Everybody's still probably 19 in their own heads, but I've been working for a long time. I spent about 10 years at Dofasco, including during the acquisition by ArcelorMittal. Ended up working in Luxembourg at the headquarters for them, in charge of all of their global desktops and laptops, so about 160,000 computers in 60 countries. So I was involved in very large-scale IT, enterprise, systems management, that sort of stuff. And then after being in Luxembourg, we moved back to Canada, and I moved to consulting and worked for Microsoft for a few years doing similar types of work, but for as a consultant. So for 4 or 5 of the big banks, municipal, provincial, federal governments, things like TELUS, Rogers, all the kind of pretty large enterprise type projects for Microsoft for a few years. And then at some point, I kind of got a bit burned out on the large enterprise side of things. Wasn't really feeling like I was making a direct impact. I really like building things and making things. And at the end of the day, I wasn't super satisfied. As you move up the food chain in enterprise, it becomes a lot less direct impact and a lot more vague. So I wanted to move to something where I had, had that ability to at the end of the day, I could see what I had accomplished. And so I left Microsoft and moved to a small company in Hamilton called Factory, which then became Parallel, which then was bought by Rank Hire, which is now Operatic, as these things go. And then after Factory, I joined Fotaflo almost 5 years ago. And I'll get into that story a little bit in the next slide. I was a director at the Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years. That was also a great experience back when we could actually do in-person networking. It was great to kind of get connected with that area of Hamilton business networking. You can see here, I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. That's probably about the only place that I do social type stuff online. And I'll give you my email address at the end of the presentation as well. So just a little bit about Fotaflo, some context about kind of what our business is and the experiences that I'm going to be talking about. So we make software that lets tour activity and attraction businesses take photos of their customers, deliver those photos, and then when their customers share those photos online, we can track the results from that. So we can track the referrals that come in, You can remarket to past guests using their own photo memories. So it's basically marketing software for experiential businesses is what we do. It was actually founded in 2009 by my business partner, Ryan O'Grady, and incorporated in 2012. I joined in 2016, so the business was around for a while, but Ryan and I are basically co-founders. That's we kind of restarted when we met, and we actually met through Innovation Factory. So this will be one of my first plugs for Innovation Factory. If you don't use Innovation Factory, you should use everything that you can that they offer. They've been just an incredible support for Fotaflo, as well as Factory before that when I was at Factory. Make use of every program they have, any advice you can get from them, mentoring. So it was actually through Innovation Factory that Ryan and I got introduced. So Innovation Factory is the reason why I am at Fotaflo. So can't say enough about that. Definitely make sure that you're using them. There's not much that you can get in the world where you get that much value for free. It's kind of incredible. So Fotaflo, we started as basically like a full service bricks and mortar type of business. In the past, we would provide camera hardware to our clients. We had a custom hardware solution that we were trying to develop. We would actually fly on site for every customer to do training for several days. We would have to fly back and forth to customers to support the hardware and fix things. Every solution was custom. It was sort of a very kind of an old-fashioned way of providing this service. And it was started on the idea of selling photos. So it was a photo sales system, like a souvenir photo sales system. And when I came in 2016, Ryan had realized that he wasn't, like, the business was operating, but it wasn't sustainable, both for the effort that it took, but also the sort of business model. And so I came in essentially to say, okay, this is a great idea. How can we make this business scalable? How can we make the changes we need so that this business can be healthy, can grow on a continuous basis and reach the potential that we both saw in the core value proposition, in that core idea that Ryan had. So we pivoted. In 2017-18, we rewrote all of our software. We stopped providing any hardware. We shut down the hardware product that we were trying to develop. And we moved to a pure business-to-business, subscription-based software as a service, like a traditional software as a service business model. And around that same time, we were in Lions Lair. I think it was 2017 was the year we were in Lions Lair. And again, another plug for Innovation Factory. If you think you want to do Lions Lair, go for it. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is you don't get through it, but you should at least apply. It's a great experience, and it's not just a pitch competition. It really, for us, the consultation that we got through that helped us to get much better at explaining what we do. Get it down to not an elevator pitch, because I'm not really a fan of elevator pitches, but get it down to better ways of explaining the value to different customers, different audiences. It was really, really valuable. So definitely recommend Lions Lair. And without going into all the gory details of ups and downs over the years, after we moved to subscription sales, we started seeing subscriptions grow 10% month over month. I'll talk about the pandemic off and on, because the pandemic obviously is a whole curveball into all of this. But outside of the pandemic, we've been growing 10% month over month in subscriptions, which means every month we have 10% more MRR than we did the month before. So pretty significant growth happening, and that's where we're at today. One thing I would mention too, we're really lucky at Fotaflo. We have basically two co-founders now. I mean, Ryan founded the company on his own. He's a non-technical co-founder, so he had to contract out to get software development done and have other people sort of lead him on the technology side. I would really recommend, I don't know what kind of businesses you have, so I'm just going to kind of speak from my own experience. It won't apply to everybody, but I would say if you have some sort of technology business or an idea, you really do need a technical co-founder. If Ryan and I had met 5 years before, it would have been a much easier path. And similarly, if you're a pure technical co-founder, you really can benefit from having a non-technical co-founder. It works. It's really tough doing it all on your own, which is I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing, and I'll talk a little bit. That's kind of what this presentation is about, is how to get from doing it all on your own to having people do stuff for you. So I think before we move on, there were a couple of polls I think that Greta had loaded in. Just some basic questions to get some idea of who's in the meeting.
Yep, so good to go. So this is the first question. If everyone could just click on and answer this for me. Okay.
Cool. All right, that's neat. I have no idea kind of what the makeup of Innovation Factory clients are, but it's interesting to see this. I see that there's services is very high, and subscription model being the next one. So hopefully a lot of what I say will help in those two examples. Probably where I have the least experience is probably with physical products, but I think for digital products, subscriptions, and for services, a lot of this will probably apply.
And I will run the next questions now as well, okay? Jen? Okay, so share results. Yeah, so services definitely at the top there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Polling is closed. Oh. Perfect. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna have you just continue on chat if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of sort of business philosophy in a way. Hopefully this is helpful. I'm a bit of an evangelist when it comes to some of these things that I'm going to talk to, and I think it really does impact your outlook, your strategy, sort of your vision of what you're trying to build as an entrepreneur. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I think it really does underpin what we've done anyways, and I hope that it is relevant or at least gets you thinking about some different ways of thinking about building businesses. So this first section, I'm going to talk about, what is a bootstrap startup and why would you want to be one? So the little cartoon that I put up here, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Gaping Void. I can't remember his actual name, but it was basically a cartoonist. This is, I don't know, 10 plus years ago, 20 years ago. He would post these little snippets. He would draw them on the back of business cards and scan them in. And it's got a bit of sort of cynical bent to it, which I like. But this one really stuck with me, and I think about it all the time. And it's that business is socializing with purpose. And I think this is becoming more and more true, especially now. You see that there's a blurring between sort of the professional and personal lives. For me personally, I don't want to go to work and, put on a robot brain and have to be somebody else and then go home and then be, the fun Chad that goes home. I want to be the same person And so this really kind of helps me to understand a way of looking at that, which is all a business is a bunch of people coming together with a purpose. So it's not, instead of just hanging out with your friends doing nothing, it's hanging out with other people, trying to do something, trying to accomplish something. And to me, that kind of really grounds, you know, what we're about at Fotaflo and what I believe business can use more of, especially with small businesses, with entrepreneurs, where you are in control. You don't have to follow a pattern or a path that that the media or the trends or the fads are telling you to follow. You can follow your own path, and so this, I think, is really empowering. So bootstrapping is basically when you build a company from the ground up with personal savings. That's essentially the definition. You use personal savings and then you finance it from sales. At Fotaflo, we take it a little bit further. At Fotaflo, we also include debt financing. So we've been very lucky to have some very favorable debt that we've been able to take on. But I still view that as bootstrapping. You're not selling equity. You're not selling to a VC. You're not trying to be a rocket ship. You're not trying to become Facebook. You're just trying to start a real, actual business. And bootstrapping is basically what that is. And that's the path that we're taking right now. More than 80% of startup operations are funded by founders' personal finances. Whether that's $1,000 or whether that's $100,000, most of us, if we're entrepreneurs, are used to, you know, the fact that it requires your personal finances to get the business going. And also keep in mind that like 90% of startups fail, right? So bootstrapped businesses are successful. Venture capital invested businesses are successful. But all startups have a very high failure rate. That's just the way that it goes. Bootstrapping can be tough. It places a lot of financial risk on the entrepreneur. But to be honest, I think you've got that anyways. Even if you go the sort of investment route, you know, you've still got financial risk. One of the challenges for bootstrapping is extremely limited resources. So you don't have an influx of, you know, here's a seed investment, here's 100,000, or, you know, here's $1 million for something, or here's a Series B. You know, you don't have that cash coming in, so that can inhibit growth. But in my mind, that helps you to build actually a stronger business, a business that's based on offering a product or service that people actually want to pay for, where they receive the value that they expect to get for it. I mean, it seems crazy to have to explain that, but it's nowadays we see so many businesses that are not predicated on the fact that you're offering something that people want to pay for in exchange for what you're giving them. I mean, that is what business is, but these days you see so many odd business models that just don't seem to be founded on actual profitable products and services. And so that focus on profitability is really critical for bootstrapping. You have to be profitable because you don't have a wad of cash to sit back on. When you're bootstrapping, you also are in full control. So that's helpful as well. You know, we have talked at Fotaflo a lot, and we've gone back and forth about, you know, should we go for investment? You know, and we have participated in you know, some pitch events, some angel events, you know, various investor kind of events where you go and you talk to VCs. You know, we've done some of that, and I just felt like we didn't get any value out of it, to be honest. It wasn't, I would much rather spend my time making my business better and more profitable. And being bootstrapped, we can make that decision. We don't have to hit some number in order to pay back a VC, or hit some number in order to, you know, trigger some other financing thing. We're in control of what we want to do, and we can make those decisions because we are in control, complete financial control. So there's a lot of pros to bootstrapping. You know, there's autonomy. You can choose to pivot. You can be more creative sometimes. You know, you can have better focus because you're not having to worry about, you know, like as a co-founder, you know, if we were going the investment route, Ryan or I would probably be almost full-time just managing that, right? Just besides pitching and preparing for pitching and you know, servicing your investors, making sure that things are all right. You know, it's a lot of work in a small business. There's not a lot of extra labor to go around. So the main focus that we have is around profitability, building the skills that we need to have a good operating business, being creative, and focusing on small goals that have sustainable improvements over time. And there's a great phrase for this. I don't know if everyone's heard of this or not, but you've probably heard of unicorns. So they talk about unicorns. I think the basic definition is, you know, $1 billion valuation is a unicorn. And typically you think about companies like Twitter, you know, Uber, Airbnb, these giant companies that disrupt the whole industry, the valuations that are just astronomical. A lot of them don't make any profit, which is crazy, right? They're funded on growth. So they're not actually making profit. They're just growing fast enough that they'll figure out the profit later, which again, to me, you know, on a personal level, that just doesn't make sense to me. And which is why we've gone the Bootstrapped route. So there's this thing called Zebras, which came out. I don't know how many people have heard of it. It was coined in 2016, so it's been around for a little while. And this, the idea is that, so unlike unicorns, zebras are real, right? Unicorns are mythical. Unicorns don't really exist. The chances of you founding a unicorn or getting that $100 million Series C, I would rather buy a lottery ticket. Like, I don't think that my effort and work is what's going to impact that happening. Zebra companies are not just one thing. They're black and white. They seek to build sustainable businesses, but sustainable businesses that also have positive impacts to society. They're not about extracting value from some ecosystem, you know, like Airbnb or Uber, where those businesses are sucking money out of those industries. Zebras are more about creating value, actually growing the pie for everybody instead of seeing how big of a piece of the pie that they can get. And because they're smaller and more focused this way, and they're not looking to own the entire industry, zebras are better at cooperating, right? At Fotaflo, we have a number of partners that we work with that we wouldn't probably work with if we had the mentality that we have to own the industry. So it allows you to be more collective and collaborative, which is helpful. And again, because zebra companies are built to be real businesses, they've got a lot of stamina and they're super capital efficient, which, you know, has served us very well. I think there's one thing that I came across when I was thinking about the zebra stuff, which is that your business model is kind of the first foundation of your business. So I saw someone paraphrase Marshall McLuhan. They said, the business model is the message. So the way that you make money as your business model, that's where all the other things like company culture and beliefs, strategies for success, end user experiences, you know, your impact to society, all of that stuff comes out of your business model. So if your business model is predicated on somehow extracting rent from somebody, as opposed to offering a product or service that people are happy to pay for because it provides value to them, then you're on a tangent that that I find personally unsatisfying. Can't answer for everybody, but these are my opinions. For unicorns or the traditional, you know, startup culture, which we are inundated with, you know, the success for a unicorn is how much money did you raise? How much money did you make when you exited? I mean, that has nothing to do with a business. Like, what does the business do? Like, is any value generated by this business? Are you helping people? Are your customers happy? Did you improve something? You know, so we're really focused on that impact to our customers and their customers, as opposed to, you know, some sort of, you know, lottery, Ponzi scheme, whatever crazy investment bingo is going on at the time. We want to make money, trust me. We are looking to make profit. We want to be very profitable, but we also want to make meaning. We want to generate some meaning in the world. The whole sort of startup culture, like, you know, pre-revenue, raise $1 million, and then 3 months later raise 10 million. I mean, it's just not, doesn't sound appealing to me, and it doesn't sound satisfying, and it also doesn't sound very likely. Like, most of us aren't going to build Facebook. That's just the way it is.
Sorry, 1 second, Chad. I do have a question.
Sure, yeah.
From Tariq, is there any data around if very little or a lot more zebra companies are VC backed? I assumed unicorns are mostly VC funded.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a link in here at the bottom here that goes to one of the articles. There's kind of a group that established this term zebra, and they have a variety of articles, and I believe they do have some data in there. And there's probably a ton out there that is available. I don't have it off the top of my head. In general, at least in my mind, a zebra would not be VC backed. Or if it is, it would be VC backed at a much later stage than the typical startup path. So like what we see, or what I saw for so long and kind of bought into for years as well, is this idea that you have this idea and somehow people are throwing millions of dollars at you, and it just didn't seem right to me. You know, with Fotaflo, we have a profitable business, we're growing well. If and when we want to take money, it'll be on our terms, and it'll be later than, you know, as soon as you have an MVP, try to get Series A, you know, like that type of cart before the horse type thing. I think I really believe in slow and steady cumulative gains over time, as opposed to, you know, rocket ship injections of capital, hire 500 people, blow it out of the water, dominate the industry, winner takes all, like that kind of thing. So in my mind, VC investment and zebras are a little bit incompatible, but that's my opinion. I don't think that that's actually part of their sort of zebra manifesto. There are zebras that do get venture capital invested. So I hope that answers the question a little bit. I don't have data off the top of my head, but it's and the thing with like this idea of a zebra too is it's not completely black or white. Like you can see there's this bit of an eye chart here of qualities. I mean, it's aspirational, right? It's what kind of a business do you want to build? Now, that's not incompatible with taking investment. I mean, you can take investment and still do those things, but I think it often is incompatible in practice, like in reality. So hopefully that helps a little bit. So looking through my notes here. So I'm going to move on to, are there any other questions about that actually? Might as well just pause kind of between sections here. I don't have, just pull the questions up there. Thanks for your question, Tariq. So yeah, now we'll move on to founder-led sales. So a lot of this will, hopefully this will kind of progress on itself. Hopefully I'm not starting out kind of too abstract. It's just sort of the way that I think through things. It will get down to sort of very practical things as we roll through this. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, again, when we're being fed these stories, or you read these blog posts, or you see the news articles about rocket ships and hockey sticks and exponential growth, and this is the sort of picture that they're portraying, right? You know, you get your seed, and then you get your Series A and B and C, and it's just this pleasant little straight line. But that's not how it works in reality. Smooth value creation doesn't happen. It's going to be a bumpy road. And so progress is bumpy. So in the beginning, you need to know, like, do we know the problem that we're solving, right? So that's the first bit of value creation. So at Fotaflo, we started with photo sales. So it was basically started as our co-founder, he was an adventure motorsports videographer, traveling the world, doing all these crazy things, you know, motocross in Africa and whatever in Siberia, and just all of these crazy adventures, and people weren't getting photos or videos of their adventures. And so he came back from that experience saying, man, there's got to be a way that, like, people want photos of these experiences. And so this is pre-iPhone. I think the first app that Fotaflo made was for Symbian, if anyone remembers that phone operating system. So this is, you know, 2009. This is almost ancient history now. Ryan started to try to think about, how do we get photos of people doing cool experiences to those people? And then it was a photo sales model. So it was like selling souvenir photo sales. And so that was the problem that he was trying to solve. And over time, so do you know the problem you're solving? You grind away for a while, right? So Ryan worked on this, tried to figure it out, you know, found some partners, figured out some technology. And it's like, yeah, okay, we do know the problem we're solving. We've got something here. There's demand. There's something here that the market isn't fulfilling that we can do. And so then the next step is, does your solution actually work? And so we were providing, like I said, hardware and software. We were flying on site to do on-site training. You know, we were trying to develop our own custom hardware. So these RFID triggered camera systems mounted up on poles, running Linux, hooked up to DSLRs, you know, running off giant batteries that were out in the forest on zip lines and things like that. Really, really hard stuff. And so this is where I would have probably said, no, it's not working. Ryan, again, as the original founder, you know, non-technical, had enough of a sense that it could work that he continued on to say, will someone pay? And we did. We had people paying. We had people that really wanted to pay for these systems. The camera systems were expensive, but they just weren't reliable. They didn't work that well. And so after we established that people would pay, the next step was, will many people pay? And this is where we really faltered before our pivot. And we made it to about 20 customers. You know, we'd get up to about 25, and then we'd lose a bunch. And so churn was high. Customers weren't very happy. It was really difficult to grow because of the manual effort involved in implementation, well, in sales, implementation, in support, and we were just sort of stuck. And it was a very high cost model. So when there were failures, for example, if a system didn't work and a customer wanted a refund, you know, it's tens of thousands of dollars. That type of capital requirement is very difficult to manage as a small business. And so what we did is we said, what Ryan noticed is what people were actually doing with these photos. So we were selling photos to people, but then, and Ryan was delivering them as email attachments at the time. Remember, this is before there were apps. There was no iPhone. There were no apps and things like that. There was barely social media. But what he saw is that people were sharing these emails. They were posting them online. And so he realized that actually provided huge value, that word of mouth marketing. And that was the second light bulb that really changed Fotaflo. And so we went back to the beginning about, this is kind of when I came online, is, excuse me, do we know the problem that we're solving? And so there was an opportunity for us to rethink the problem that we were solving, which is, how can we harness the power of photo memories to create value for our customers and their guests, and in turn for Fotaflo? So again, not looking to extract money out of the industry, but really, how can we harness the intrinsic value of these photo memories to create value for everyone? Provide great photo memories for customers, provide great word of mouth marketing for the businesses that offer that experience, and then, you know, some sort of compensation for Fotaflo so that we can be successful, we can pay ourselves, we can have the lives that we want to have. And so that was a huge risky pivot that we took. Most people don't want to rewrite everything, but it's what we had to do, and the opportunity that we saw was big enough. And so we pivoted on that. We determined that it does actually work. You know, we knew that it would work, and then we had to rewrite our software to actually adapt to that model now. And then once we started offering subscriptions, we saw that people would pay. So we made it to, I think we had $100,000 in annual subscription value within 7 months. So it was obvious people will pay subscription payments for this service. And then we determined that many people will pay. We grew past that 20 to 25 kind of level that we were stuck at. Now I think we've got around 120 customers, and it's growing faster. We've had new customers every month for 2 or 3 years now. You know, it's clear that we've answered these questions properly, and then you need to answer these questions before you can start to think about growing sales, hiring people, you know, all that other kind of stuff. And these are the kind of things that I think get forgotten when people just reach for that VC investment. They think that big check is going to somehow answer these questions. That big check will help to fund you to answer these questions, but along that way, it can also distort your options about how you might answer the questions, if that makes sense. And so basically, this is our first org chart. So I'm focusing mostly on customer journey stuff in this deck. So things like sales. I mean, marketing would kind of be on the front end of that, but I'm going to leave marketing out. So basically like sales, implementation, onboarding, adoption, whatever it is in your terminology for your particular business that, you know, what happens after sales, basically. Like there's going to be something, there's fulfillment. Maybe you ship them a product, you send them a digital product, you perform the services you're going to perform, whatever it is. You know, in our case with software as a service, we have like onboarding and adoption is our terminology for how you get someone from a sale to using your product. And then after that, you've got support. And then you've also got really important retention and expansion, right? You need to make sure that you keep your customers. And if your current customers are happy, maybe you can expand those accounts. So in the beginning, you know, if you're a solo entrepreneur, or even in the case of, you know, say partners, I mean, this is you're doing everything. And that doesn't even count all the stuff that I put at the bottom. I mean, you know, these are all things that need to be done, and it's all you at the beginning. It's pretty tough. It's not sustainable, obviously. I mean, you can be a solo operator, a solopreneur forever if you want, but I think if you're in this session, you're interested in how to grow and how to be able to sell more and leverage that to continue to grow. So it's clear you can't continue to do all this stuff on your own. But it can be really hard to make progress because you're just inundated, right? You're at 100% capacity all the time. And so how do you make progress out of this? How do you start to figure out, you know, what are ways that you can think about this to allow you to have the time to build systems, to build things that can free up your time so that you can start to leverage, you know, leverage your abilities to grow the business that doesn't require you to do everything. I mean, that's kind of one of the fundamental challenges with entrepreneurship. And so this next section is also a little bit abstract, but I'm hoping that it gives you some thoughts. These are the ways that I think about these problems that have worked for me, and hopefully they might give you kind of ways to think about it. The real world isn't simple, and that's another criticism I have of the sort of fad, trendy blogosphere. Oh, it's so easy. You just make a pitch deck and then you go to the pitch competition and then someone gives you $1 million. It's like, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. You might get lucky, but I'm building a business. I'm not looking to win the lottery. I want to build a business that operates day in, day out, that makes money, that grows, that's healthy. I'm not looking for an easy win. And so there's a lot of metaphors that I use to help think about these things, and some sort of lenses and systems. One is this big ball of yarn. You've got this big ball of yarn, it's all tangled up, and you can't really see where like what anything is in there. You can only really make progress by just kind of picking at it a little bit. So like, explore your product market fit a bit, or, spend some time thinking about your finances and pull on that a little bit, and think about your technology and pull on that a little bit. And eventually you start to see these threads start to come out, and eventually the whole ball sort of starts to fall open a little bit where you can actually see what's going on. And so I use that metaphor quite a lot, especially if we're dealing with problems where we can't really see into it. We know it's kind of a mess, right? So just figure out what you can latch onto, make some sense of something, and then just keep kind of pulling at it. And that's a metaphor that I find can help to kind of dig out of some of these situations where you're just sort of, you got that crush of just, as an entrepreneur, just everything. There are too many variables in business to find one size fits all solutions. So even the things that I'm telling you today, it's just authentic. I'm just talking from my experience and the way I think about things. I'm glad to be wrong. I'm glad to learn from other people. There's too many variables. There's too many variables in business to even have a single framework, right? There's tons of frameworks about whether it's specific to sales or management or technology or finance. There's frameworks upon frameworks upon frameworks, and there isn't just one framework that works. Oh, just do this framework and your business will be great. So what I like to do is build habits around ways of thinking, constantly explore alternative ways of thinking about situations, and then use that reflection to make progress. Another way of thinking about it is like buying a house, right? If you go to buy a house, let's say you're just looking at two houses. Can you actually say like this house is better than this house? Well, not really. How many different variables are there, right? I mean, the property, and are the systems good? The furnace and the roof, and does the yard look nice? Can you do the renovations you want to need to? Does it have a hot tub? How many bedrooms does it have? Like, do I like the floors or not? How, can I afford to redo the kitchen? Like, the number of variables, it's not just like a yes, no, this is better, this is worse. You're making a considered decision, and business is all about making those considered decisions. A few other things, Flintstoning. So in a small business, you're not going to be able to go from nothing to a perfect solution. So Flintstoning is, if you think of the Flintstones cartoon, if you know that cartoon, they've got a car and it doesn't have an engine. They just use their feet to kind of run and make the car go. So that's what Flintstoning is. It's, for example, in Fotaflo right now, we have a situation where we have some clients who still sell photos. We need to pay them out a certain amount of money because some of their revenue goes through our system. There's only about 4 or 5 clients that are like this. So we haven't built an automatic system that automatically tallies that, does an electronic transfer. We Flintstone it. I do it on a monthly basis. I go in and I add up what we need to pay them, and we pay them. Eventually we can turn that into a system. Eventually we can perfect that. But in the beginning, when you're just trying to figure out how to do something, don't automate it, just Flintstone it. Make it look kind of like an automated service to your customer, but it's fine if it's a manual thing in the back end. Another way to think about tasks and systems, because I'm going to talk a lot about that coming up soon, is what are you doing that's ad hoc? So what are the things that you do that are kind of like different every day, or one by one, or it's a one-off? And then what are the things that you're doing that are systematic? And are there things you're doing that are one-off that you should systematize? So, are there things that's like, gee, I do this all the time, it's really annoying, it's taking a lot of my time, it's worth it for me to make that into a system? Or are there things that you're trying to make systematic where I only do that twice a month, why don't I just manually do that? Another great technique is zooming in and zooming out. And that's to say, if you're stuck in a situation and you don't know what to do, so let's say your situation is, I need to grow revenue. I physically can't sell anymore. I'm just, I'm at capacity. That's a situation where you can feel really stuck, right? You're just, I don't know what to do. I don't have the money in the bank to hire somebody. I don't even know how to hire somebody. I don't know how to hire a salesperson. Like, if you're in these situations where you're kind of stuck, zooming in and zooming out can help to, again, find a loose thread that you can pull on. So a lot of times these days we're really lucky. That could just be Googling, just Google. But basically you can zoom out and say, okay, let's not just think about me being stuck how to hire a salesperson. Let me zoom out and just learn about hiring salespeople in general. How does it work? Maybe I can learn something at an abstract level that'll be like, now I know what I can do. I can talk to this person that I know because I remember them talking about this. And it's getting out of being too zoomed in the day-to-day work to really see patterns and pictures that can help you to break out of that. And another piece of vocabulary that we use at Fotaflo is what we call in work and on work. So most of the time, a lot of the time, you're working in your department. So like you're working in sales, which means you're phoning people, you're trying to close deals, you're finding leads, you're pursuing them, you're doing the work in sales. And we distinguish that kind of work from on work. So when you work on sales, you are thinking about your strategy, you're coming up with new content that you can reuse, you're thinking about how you can change the way that you do sales. You're thinking about sales from a zoomed out perspective. And we find that really helps. Like, we're still a small team, we're 6 employees right now. But that helps us to distinguish between, this week I'm working in technology, which means I'm just programming away. Next week I'm working on technology, which means I'm thinking about the strategic direction of our architecture, or I'm changing the tools that we use to do our technology. So just a couple of things around working in and on work. So again, hopefully I'm not being too abstract. I'm just trying to share ways that we think through things and how we ended up where we are. Any other questions right now? No?
If anyone has a question, feel free. I can always just put your hand up or type it in the Q&A.
Are we able to do the other poll questions, Greta?
Yeah, so why don't we? Sounds good. So I've just launched a number of questions. These are all related to Chad's presentation. So and the answers are coming in.
Looks like we haven't had people drop off, so my monologue
Exactly.
is going okay. So
it's always a good sign. And Douglas has great presentation, Chad. Thank you so much so far.
Great.
So we've got 10 people that have answered.
So it looks like a even mix between people who currently have employees or not. Most don't have sales-focused employees. It's kind of what I would expect from an IF audience.
Yep.
And then similarly for kind of the stage, this relates to that bumpy chart that I showed before. And this probably actually is aligns, I'm guessing, with what IF sort of deals with as well, which is, helping people through these stages. And again, there's different frameworks and you can do all sorts of different ways of figuring these things out, business model canvases and all sorts of things to answer similar types of questions. But that's really interesting to see. So it looks like a lot of you are probably starting to think about how can I get someone else to help me sell is probably starting to come up in a lot of your minds. And so a lot of what I've talked about so far has been, our history, a little bit of our history, as well as a lot of my just mental models, the way that I think about things, the way I try to analyze things. And then, so now we're going to move into a little bit of like how we applied that stuff, how, what we tried, what we learned, some opinions on how we, how you could maybe take some shortcuts that don't require you to make some of the same mistakes. And again, this is all just based on our experience. It's not from a textbook or anything. So attempts at scaling sales. So this is really the next stage, right? So that first slide showed the first 4 milestones there, and it never stops. So that's, everybody knows this in business. It doesn't stop. You're just the next thing you have is the next bottleneck or the next opportunity or the next challenge. So once you know that, once you've answered these questions, like you've got someone that will pay, you've got many people who will pay, the critical question that's next is, can a non-founder sell this? In the beginning, you have to be able to sell your service. You have to be able to get out in the world. That's how you learn whether anyone will pay. You need that feedback. A lot of especially SaaS businesses, a lot of modern startups, they really avoid doing that outbound sales. They avoid cold calling. They avoid talking to potential customers. They want everything to come in through, Facebook ads or social media, or, getting on a trendy blog or something. But as a founder, you need to get out and talk to people, because that's the only way you can learn if you're going to be able to offer value that people will pay for. The next step is, can other people do that? And that's what we're going to get into. But it doesn't stop there, right? It's, you might find that a non-founder can sell, but can you repeat that? And then once you can repeat that, can you actually, max out that sales team once you've got multiple salespeople? Okay, now that you've got a sales team executing, can you build a team of teams? And then obviously this just keeps going on and on as you build an enterprise, right? As you build out your business. So what did we try?
Yeah, we have another question.
Sure.
This is from Marcus. How do you prioritize all the different tasks on the to-do list?
The simplest way that we tend to fall back to is the urgent important matrix, if anyone's familiar with that. So you've got things that are urgent and important, which you need to do now. So let's say you have a tax filing that's due on Friday, like you need to do that. Let's say you have a customer who's calling and is upset or needs something, like that's urgent and important. Then you have things that are, I'm going to struggle to remember them all, but then you have things that are not urgent and not important. Those are things that you just shouldn't do. Just don't do them. If they're not urgent and they're not important. Then you have things that are important and non-urgent. And those things need to be done, but you can plan to do them at a time that makes sense to you. And then you have things that are urgent but non-important. And those are things that you can often delegate. So if it's a menial task that like needs to get done, you can often delegate those types of things because they need to get done, but they're not critical. They're not important from a founder perspective. And so we always use that lens, not always, but we often use that urgent important matrix. And if you Google for that, you'll find a ton of stuff on it. And it also relates to some of those kind of mental models that I talked to around ad hoc versus systematic. I mean, you want to be able to make sort of cumulative improvements, right? So if you're spending time on something, can you spend some time on something that means that it creates more time for you later? right? So if you're spending a lot of time on something, can you find a way to automate that, delegate it, maybe just don't do it in a way that has compounding benefits? So as opposed to just a one-time do a hard task and then you have to do it again and again, try to figure out ways to free yourself up from the things that are routine, our time sucks, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that helps. A few other things might pop into my head as we go through, because I think some of the stuff coming up kind of might relate to that. And, you know, like I said, this is just me talking, so there's going to be times where I sort of stumble, don't have an exact answer. I'm going to go through some things that we tried, and I don't know if you guys have tried similar things, but I'll talk about what we've done. It's interesting because we kind of have two businesses at Fotaflo. We have the pre-pivot business, and then now we have the pure software business. And so one thing that I know that happened early on is was premature hires. So we did have a salesperson that was hired back when we had our hardware product, and they were selling, you know, and seemed to be selling well. You know, they could close deals. They were hunting. They were finding leads, closing some good deals. But if you remember back at that initial bumpy graph when I said this is the part where I probably would have said it doesn't actually work. So we ran into problems where this salesperson was selling stuff, but our product, our service, our technology couldn't fulfill it. The customers weren't satisfied. You know, it's not like it wasn't snake oil. I mean, it was a product. It did work, but it just wasn't reliable. There were challenges with, you know, network connectivity or power, the batteries, and, you know, we were going through new versions of our hardware and the software. And so, you know, we were selling something that wasn't ready to be sold. It was more like a beta test. And so that premature hire didn't work out, and probably through no fault of theirs. It was just that we weren't ready to grow because it was too early. Another thing that we did, actually I forgot to put it in the deck. We did a lot of trade shows and conferences, so physical trade shows and conferences in our case, and those were quite successful. We probably will do those again, because for us they do provide ROI, but they are a very high cost both in time and energy. So the logistics around packing up conference booth equipment, shipping that down to conferences, renting other booth equipment, setting that up, staffing the booth, paying for staff to fly down, hotels, all those logistics is a lot of complexity. It did pay off for us, but now that we've moved to some lower price subscription models, it's not as much of a slam dunk. So before, when we had that hardware product, I mean, we might sell a customer that's going to drop 25 grand in upfront costs plus, you know, 25 grand plus a year, 25 grand plus over the year. So these were pretty high value customers. So, you know, if we signed one customer at a conference, that would pay for it. Now that we have some lower price subscription models, it might not be quite as obvious. We'd have to sign more at each conference. I think we still will do them, but they're a lower priority right now because of that. We tried lots of other low cost experiments when it comes to sales, not all related to hiring sales, but just things that we tried. So I know Ryan, he tried an actual mailer. So I think he got $1,000 in $5 bills, put those in envelopes and mailed them out to whatever that is, 200, is that what it is? 200, you know, identified potential leads, put the $5 bill in an envelope with a letter saying, hey, I'd like to buy, you know, 10 minutes of your time or something like that. Super gimmicky, kind of a little bit of an odd sort of sales thing, but it worked great. He signed a whole bunch of business. I know Dave Carter from Innovation Factory is a big fan of saying, you know, what's the cheapest way that you can test something, right? And so for $1,000, it's, you know, it's not nothing, but $1,000 in the scheme of trying to build a business is pretty much nothing. Maybe that works. Maybe you can send out a $5 bill to 200 people and get enough of, even if you don't get sales from it, maybe you get a bunch of great conversations that answer questions that you need to get answered about product market fit or potential new markets, or, you know, customer personas and all this sort of things that you're trying to learn. Something that I meant to mention on an earlier slide is that I really believe that business isn't about what you know. So business isn't about what degree you have, or your past experience or your technical skills. Business is about how fast can you learn. That's it. Because if you're an entrepreneur, and especially if you're running a business that's in any way related to technology, tomorrow's not the same as today. You need to be able to learn fast, always reflect on what works and what doesn't work, and adjust based on that. It doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. You're going to, you'll wander around from time to time, but it's the only way that you're going to progress. Is you have to learn, and businesses that learn faster are going to be more successful. So if there are low-cost experiments that you can do, try them out. So we've also done a lot of virtual events lately. Probably everybody has. Those can be super low cost. I mean, there are virtual events, specific to our industry anyways, and I'm sure it's the same for any industry that you're in. There are virtual events where you can get a ticket for $29 now, right? And that's way cheaper than a $1,000 conference ticket, plus airfare and hotels. So just start searching, find online events that are, maybe they're even tangential. Maybe they're virtual events that aren't actually events that you would sell at, but maybe it's a virtual event to learn other skills. So, marketing events, sales events, different types of events that are sort of training events. I mean, things like this session are free, but there's a ton of low cost events. And even if you want to sponsor those events and participate as an exhibitor or as a sponsor or a speaker, those can be super low cost. We've had a lot of, our business profile has been raised a lot over the pandemic because of our participation in these events. And Ryan has run workshops and done talks at a bunch of them, and it doesn't cost us very much, especially because we don't have to travel. And we learn a lot. We connect with a lot of people. It's great to get our brand out there as a small business. We're not taking out $1 million ad buys. People don't always know about us, but that has really raised our profile. We also worked with VA partners. So I know Mark is on the call today. So part of our Lions Lair winnings, when we came in third there, we got some services from VA partners. And so that was great. I don't think it resulted in sales that we wanted, but again, it was about learning. What can we learn? Here's a company that this is what they do, right? They do outbound sales as a service. Like this is their bread and butter. We were still, this is 2017, 18. So this is a little while ago already. We're still a little rough around the edges. We don't have defined sales processes. We don't have repeatable, playbooks and so on, but working with them forced us to document things that we hadn't documented, or revise things that we hadn't revised for a while, or work with them to understand, oh, we need this script, we need a call script, we need a follow-up script. And so again, the things that don't work can be as valuable as the things that do work, especially if they're low cost, as long as you learn from it. And so, the material that we got from VA partners, we've referred to over and over and over again, even with the recent hires that we made for sales staff. So again, huge value that you need to be looking for. How do you pull value out of, how do you learn from everything that you're doing? Another thing that we tried was very small contracts. So I'm talking like tiny contracts where we would budget, $500 or $1,000 and find somebody that wanted to do some outbound calling for us and just try out some call scripts. We use HubSpot. I can talk a bit more about tools. I think I've got some stuff coming up for that. But just, we put together here's some emails we think will work. follow that up with a phone call. Here's a script we think will work. Again, building on stuff from VA partners. And so we had a couple of people who we assigned them some batches of leads and just said, here, go at it. We'll pay you. It was super cheap. I can't even remember what it was, like $15 an hour. We'll pay you X amount for like every meeting that you get booked. And again, it didn't really work that well. We got a couple leads. I think we might've got a couple of customers, but we learned a lot and we started to hone that process to go from the ad hoc, like one by one, everything is custom, to something that can be repeatable. And so all of these things build on each other. You learn from it. And I believe you can't go from 0 to 100. You can't go from standing still to running. You know, you need to learn to crawl, to walk, to run. And again, in business, it's how fast can you learn that stuff? We also did hire some full-time contract sales staff. Again, this was around 2018, I believe. It was kind of at the time when we were pivoting, but we didn't have our subscription pricing set out. We were still kind of answering some of those questions. And so again, when I think back now, I think this was too early. And we made a couple of mistakes in those contractors because we didn't have the financial resources. We paid them pretty minimally. So it was a $30,000 base salary plus commission. And so we got a couple of people who weren't experienced salespeople. They were great people, passionate about Fotaflo, loved what we did, could probably sell it now. But again, I don't think as a business we were ready. We didn't have the processes to back them up. A lot of deals were still custom, still required, Ryan as the co-founder to formulate deals, to actually close them. And so they sort of floundered, and it didn't really work out that well. Again, we try to learn as we go, but that didn't quite work out. Another area that I think, I mentioned this earlier, is that a lot of SaaS companies, a lot of digital type companies, they try to avoid sales, and then they focus on like content marketing, paid advertising, partnerships, word of mouth, expecting that you're going to get this flood of signups, right? Again, we see all these stories, we see these blog posts. I put my software as a service online on Wednesday, and I had 100,000 users by Saturday. Like, great. I mean, it does happen, but it probably won't happen to you. It's not happening to us. It does happen, but those are exceptions. I mean, if you have a CEO who's already a personality, who's already known, has an audience, then it can work. But if you're just an unknown startup, nobody knows who you are, they're not just going to suddenly magically start finding you. Again, you might get lucky, or if you're like a Google ad wizard and you know how to do that and you know how to target it and make it effective, maybe you can do that. But what we really realized is, so we had a couple of projects through Can Export. So Can Export is through the federal government, and they support businesses that are looking to export globally, so products and services around the world. So they will provide you with funding to fund a whole bunch of different activities. I would really highly recommend that you look at the Can Export program. If you are a business that's trying to sell outside of Canada, most of our business is outside of Canada. And so we had a Can Export project recently. As part of that project, we spent, what was it? It was about at least 15 grand, I think, on paid advertising, mostly Google ads, working with a partner. And we were hoping that we would see through these ads, we would see people coming in, signing up for our service, or at least contacting us, these inbound sales, these what we call low touch sales, like these people who just kind of show up and they're like, hey, I want to buy your product. And it just didn't happen. We learned a lot. I won't go into all the details about that, but like I've been saying, we learned from that experience. One of the things we learned is that I believe that we're still too small. We need to focus on outbound sales. We need to focus on Fotaflo people reaching out to identified, qualified leads and trying to sell them. As we get bigger, as we have thousands of customers, we have advertising budgets, we have more awareness in the marketplace of who we are, we can leverage word of mouth for our, from our thousands of customers, then I believe we will start to see more of that inbound self-sign up, that kind of classic SaaS model happening. But for now, I think what we learned is that we need to focus on selling somewhat one-to-one. We know we can do that. We can do it well. We can close business. Let's grow that way, and then we'll revisit that sort of inbound sales stuff later. There are some other general business things I can't stress enough. Spend the time to document what you do. If you look back with VA partners, if you look at those mailers that I talked about, those small contracts that we tried with a couple of contractors, that's all documented. We actually have Google Docs that are like, this is the email that they sent. This is the phone call script that they used. You take the time to write that stuff out. Like that's your learning, right? That's your record. That's how you can not just throw that away, right? You can keep that forever. You can reflect on it. You can go back and say, hey, this mailer worked really well. This one email, we got good traction. Let's just try that one again the next time, That's how you can start to build repeatability rather than having to reinvent it every time you need to do something. And that's kind of what I was talking about, cumulative long-term sort of improvements is the work that you do, make sure you can reuse it. Keep a record of it. Know what worked or worked well. And share those documents internally, but also share those documents, either the written documents or talk about it with your advisors. So again, like Innovation Factory is awesome to talk to them about. Hey, we tried this. What do you think? This worked or this didn't work? You'll get great feedback on, oh, well, maybe it didn't work because of this. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, next time we'll change that, right? It's the only way you're going to learn and be able to progress. Be willing to make mistakes. So a lot of times when we're talking in business, it's all about, I have a belief and I'm going to convince you about my belief. Take the time to think about how you might be wrong. Rather than trying to justify what you already believe, try to think about, well, in what ways could I be wrong? Maybe my assumptions are incorrect. That type of thinking is really, really helpful. We live in a world right now where people often talk at each other and don't really have a conversation where you're empathizing and trying to understand, what you're hearing. And as an entrepreneur, it's really important to be humble, to take that feedback, to reflect on it, and then to implement changes based on that. And always be thinking about the customer journey, and that the customer journey is, everything that your customer experiences from the first time they hear about your business until they stop being a customer, basically. Like all of those touch points, that's what you need to optimize. Anywhere that there's friction, reduce that friction. If your pricing is complicated, simplify your pricing. If your contracts are complicated, simplify your contracts. If your pitch, your features and benefits and so on are complicated, make them simpler. If your technology is complicated in some sort of process that you need to do when you're selling or post sales, reduce the friction there. Reducing friction is how you can also build permanent, repeatable improvements in efficiency along the way. One thing that I'm going to suggest here is, depending on your business, you might want to hire for customer success before you hire for sales. So I don't know if I didn't ask this question, but customer success, basically in our world, in the SaaS world, covers all these three areas. So primarily the first two, so the onboarding, adoption, and support is kind of the main part of customer success. If you can, customer success can also take accountability for retention and expansion. Sometimes that might be reassigned back to a salesperson or back to a founder. If it's a critical customer, you may want the owner to be involved in retention, or your customer success person might not be great at selling and expansion, so you might want sales to do that. But essentially all of this stuff that happens after sales, when it's just you selling, I mean, you have to do it all. So the sale, you got the sale, you ring the bell, you're like, this is amazing, I got a customer. Then it's like, okay, so now I got to stop selling and get this customer up and running, whatever that means. Maybe it's fast, maybe there's an onboarding process. For us, there's still a process of getting them into the system, getting them set up, getting them to use our product, getting it to be a routine part of their business operations. And then there's support, right? So, I mean, Ryan, up until a few years ago, he was on 24/7 customer support for, I don't know, 7 years or something, right? That's your time that you can't spend on something else. So depending on your business, this, I think, for us, it's a no-brainer. For us, I can't imagine doing it any other way, that having a customer success representative or customer success manager, it can be a stopgap that lets you as the founder spend more time on sales. And so when you can focus more on sales, that's when you can start to think about sales more systematically. You can really, you can start to understand things like pipelines and wins and losses and like deal cycle times, because you're really only doing sales. So you can spend more time on sales and get more data and learn more and know that after the sale, things are going to be handled. That's the clean way of looking at it. Obviously, business is messier. There's still overlap, and it depends on who you get for those roles and exactly what your business is. But this has served us so well. Haley is our client success manager, and I mean, she's just a rock star that takes on so much of this stuff, that otherwise Ryan, would have had to do before, or someone else, myself or someone else. And what tends to happen if you can't focus on sales and you have to switch from sales to post sales, is you end up with this roller coaster of, focusing on sales, close a bunch of deals, focusing on implementation. Now your pipeline is drying up. Oh crap, now we need more sales to make money. Focus on sales, right? And because there's only so many hours in the day, you can only do so much. You end up with this whipsaw effect of, hey, sales are going great. Oh crap, sales are bad. Oh, sales are going great. Customer success can start to help to make it so that you can stay focused on sales for a longer period of time. So now I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff around, at least my opinion on when you're ready to hire actual dedicated salespeople. Again, based on what we tried before, the things that didn't quite work, the experiments that we did, the things that we learned. You do want to have paying customers. So don't try to hire for sales if you don't actually have paying customers. Unless you're hiring a co-founder, right? If you're hiring somebody who is that sort of person who is going to start from scratch and do this, as a partner or something, then you can do that. But generally, if you're going to hire someone, you need to have enough things in place that have, like a repeatable, documented sales process of some sort. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be done, but you need to have something that you can train somebody on that's repeatable, where they don't have to figure it out on their own. Have stable pricing. So one thing that I didn't talk about is, like, we've gone through pretty much every pricing model that you can ever think of at Fotaflo. And what really made the difference for us is when we did move to subscription pricing, and we've had the same pricing now for a little over 2 years, like the exact same pricing, the same pricing model. Excuse me. And again, it's not perfect, but it's stable and it's fair. So a lot of times what happens early on is you have what I call Snowflake deals. I guess Snowflake has a different connotation these days, but basically it means that everyone is unique. And so in the beginning, you don't know what to charge people. You don't know the monetary value of what you're providing. So we would have deals where people would pay, a revenue share of photo sales, or they pay for how many customers they delivered photos to, or they pay by how many referrals they generated, from that. They pay straight monthly, all these sorts of different sliding scales and formulas. if you're going to start selling, if you're going to hire for sales, you need something that is stable, because the salespeople aren't going to be, they're not like founders, right? A founder can cook up any deal they want. A founder can get on the phone, and if the customer says, yeah, I actually only want to pay $123 a month, the founder can say, okay, right? The founder has that prerogative. You don't want your sales staff to just be constantly making up those kind of custom deals. You want to be pretty cookie cutter, or have parameters on what can be adjusted. And you also want your pricing to be transparent and fair, right? Would you be okay if any of your customers knew what other customers were paying? And the answer should be yes. It's not always yes, but the answer should be yes, or you should be able to justify why a certain customer might pay different or pay more than another customer. You want to have enough data for patterns. So like I said before you hire for sales, you need to have some indication of, win rates, pipelines, sales cycles. You need to know, does it take a week to close? Does it take 3 months? What's the average deal size? Do I need to have 100 people in the pipeline or 3? Do I win 3 out of 10 or do I win 7 out of 10? So before you hire, you need to know some of these things. Something else that I also can't stress enough is use tools. You don't have to be a master of technology, but you need to have some, it's a digital world now, especially with online working, and we're a fully remote company, so we work completely online. You need to use these tools. We use a bunch, so make sure you've got a good CRM. There are free options out there. It could be a spreadsheet. Make sure you know how to use some kind of these tools. Like, you don't have to be an expert on presentations, but maybe you know spreadsheets, or vice versa. Make sure that these are documented. Make sure that they're not private. So at Fotaflo, we are also a transparent company. So by default, everything that everybody creates in the company is searchable and visible to everybody else. So if someone drafts an awesome document with a great email template, anybody can find that and reuse it. You want to be able to reuse the value that you're creating. We use a ton of tools. That's not what this presentation is about, but we use HubSpot is we use for marketing, sales, and support. We use Trello. We use the Google Suite for those sorts of things. We use Slack. So yeah, make sure you're using tools and learn how to use them. So you do want to have repeatable processes. So like I've said before, some of this is repeating a little bit, but have you documented, what is a marketing qualified lead for you? What is a sales qualified lead? What are the triggers that mean that somebody's warm or qualified? What are the things that lead? What are the qualities of leads that you use to triage? What's a good lead or a bad lead? How do you follow up with leads? Do you call them the same day? Do you send them an email and then phone them a day later? Like, start to write these things down, and try not to write them down in a way where they get like written in stone, right? I'm not talking about formal design documents that you see at big giant enterprises. I'm just, at least just write things down so that you can refer back to them and make sure you're being able to build repeatable processes. This is really important too. Like, what are the processes, right? Like, when you're selling a deal, closing a deal, what happens after you close, right? All that customer success stuff. What are those processes? How does that handover happen? These are things that you need to have some idea of, because if you're going to hire salespeople and they start closing deals and you have a mess that happens afterwards, that's obviously not going to bring success for those new customers. So you need to have some of these things in place. Again, like I've said, creating reusable content is just it's gold, right? That's an asset. A lot of what I'm talking about is building assets in your company that aren't just throwaway. Oh, I sent this great email to one person one time. It's like, well, if that's a great email, stick it somewhere where you can reuse it. Use templates, use sequences. In HubSpot, you can build sequences of emails that go out automatically. Build reusable presentations. Another thing that we do at Fotaflo is screen recordings. So record your meetings, do screen recordings, share those internally. When our sales staff just came on recently, we had I don't know, 10 or 20 recordings of Ryan and other staff doing sales pitches or like sales meetings with potential leads. These were all recordings that we had taken before. So the new sales staff, we could just say, here, go to Google Drive. Here's 10 or 20 recordings. You don't have to watch all of them. Just start watching through them, and then they'll learn. They'll see exactly how we talk to leads. They'll hear the same phrases and the same objections and the way that we handle those. To actually write that out in a document would be exhaustive. We do also have those documents because we document everything, but a screen recording or a video recording or a meeting recording, the information density in there could be really high for communicating to new hires about things that they should do. Can you generate enough leads to fill their pipelines, right? There's no sense hiring someone if they're going to be sitting there going, gee, I wonder who I can sell to. You know, you need to know that you're going to be able to keep them busy, or that you have a way that they can find their leads if that's part of their role, is to actually hunt for leads and prospect on their own. And then obviously before you hire a salesperson, you need to understand how you're going to pay them. So you need to have something that's achievable. Those low-cost experiments were really very helpful for us. I mentioned that we had tried to hire some low-cost contractors as well. Didn't work out so well. You can hire on pure commission. It is possible. We haven't done that, but that's an option that is low risk because you're not committed to a base salary, obviously. That might be helpful in the very, very early stages where you're not sure if it can be sold by a non-founder, right? You're not sure. And so you want to, like, basically, if it's successful, you're going to pay them. If it's not, you don't have to pay them. So that can be a method to do that. I don't think you're going to get quite the quality of person, but again, it's, you know, you're always trying to balance resources. What we've done is base plus commission. So our recent 2 hires is a $50,000 base salary, and then we have a sliding commission based on how much they sell in annual contract value. And again, this is where spreadsheets come in. You need, if you aren't good with spreadsheets, you will need somebody who is, because spreadsheets are just magic for modeling out, you know, hypotheses. I think maybe if like, so I built a spreadsheet where it was like, based on Ryan selling, you know, and he wasn't selling full time, I knew he could sell this many deals a month. Okay, let's put annual contract value, this many deals a month, that much revenue, this much annual revenue, this much lifetime value. And then you can start to apply percentages and ratios and see, okay, well, if we pay them this much % commission on this much, they make this much. And it's a model and a way of testing hypotheses that I think is incredibly valuable in business. And so you need a way to do that. If it's not a spreadsheet, then at least on paper or something, you need to be able to model these things out and to have some idea about how things are going to work. A couple of things not to do. Don't assume your customers are getting value. You know, once the sale is done, make sure you check. This can be a big problem if you're, so this kind of relates to some of the earlier mistakes when we hired somebody, but the product wasn't ready. You know, you might think that you're selling, and then you find out later that actually none of your customers are happy, or they're not getting the value they thought they were going to get, or they're not getting the value that you thought you were providing. You always have to be checking in with your customers. If you're not doing customer satisfaction surveys, you have to start doing those. It's essential. You need to know that post-sales, things are okay. Like I said before, don't hire a salesperson to just figure it out. This is a little bit kind of like what we did with our early sales contractors. We didn't really have, you know, repeatable sales processes. We didn't really have stuff locked down. Like our messaging was still kind of sloppy. We were kind of still figuring out how to communicate the value in a way that was repeatable. Don't hire a salesperson and be like, okay, you figure out how to sell, you know, like you come up with whatever collateral, you come up with whatever process, you can, you know, you figure out where the leads might be. That's not going to work. Again, unless it's like a co-founder, unless it's like somebody who actually is of that type of personality who's probably going to be involved in your business as more than just an employee, it's not going to work out well. And then, yeah, don't spray and pray. Like don't acquire a whole bunch of customers and have only a few of them work out. That's just not gonna work. I did have a 10-minute break scheduled in here, but I'm thinking I might just continue on. I don't know if anyone has an opinion on that.
Yeah, if you could just continue on, this is fascinating. So I'd love to hear more. So
the last big section is all about what we did recently, the process that we followed to hire. So who do you hire? One of the biggest things that I came across that I think really changed my thinking on hiring recently is an article that I came across, and it says always hire two. It was difficult for me to think about this at first because I'm thinking about how much that will cost. And that is a consideration. It may not be possible to hire two if you just don't have the resources. But I think this is a really critical idea that I think I will probably use every time that I need to hire. And the reason is, you'll probably think, oh, I want to hire one person because then I can afford to pay them more. I can hire a better person. I can hire, the best person I can. But the problem is you won't learn anything, because if you hire one rep and they don't do well, you won't know why. They'll probably blame you, your crappy product, your company, lack of marketing. You didn't have the right supports for them, the right training. You won't know. You won't. I mean, sometimes you might. I mean, if it's obvious, for example, they don't show up for work, then yeah, that's a problem. But you're not usually dealing with those sorts of issues. You're usually dealing with something like, hey, they're just not performing how I thought they'd perform. You won't know if it's you or them. If they do really well, you also won't know why. Like, are they just a rock star salesperson, right? Do they have great phone skills, or are they selling different deals than you actually want them to sell? Are they selling only a certain type of customer? You just don't know, right? You've only got one data point. You won't know whether it's them or whether it's you, essentially. And actually, I guess we kind of did this not intentionally, but we did hire those two full-time contractors a few years ago, and that's probably, I didn't even realize it till I was just saying it right now, but that probably is what helped us to understand that we weren't ready to have those people as salespeople, is because we did hire two, and neither of them really performed that well. Like, there were sales, but it just, like, I mean, it didn't cover their base salary, right? So it's like, and so that actually is interesting. I just thought about that. We probably should have listened to that signal earlier. We kept them on for way too long. We probably should have realized within a few months, hey, neither of them are selling. That means it's our problem. We need to fix some stuff. So yeah, if you can hire two, it's great. All candidates are imperfect. So again, this gets back to some of those mental models at the beginning, right? It's balancing a whole bunch of variables. Hiring is really hard. You're judging a human being, right? Like you're trying to find somebody who can do the job, is good to work with, is a good person. It's just all these different variables that you're trying to balance, and it's never going to be this person got 10 out of 10 on everything. It's always going to be, well, they got this, there's this issue, or we have this concern. And so just recognize that they're all candidates are going to be imperfect. Would you buy from the rep? So this is kind of a very easy, very basic question you can ask, and it has a ton of value. And it's easy to answer typically, because you can tell, in the course of a very short meeting with somebody, it's like, would you buy from this person? And especially for your first couple of sales hires, the answer has to be yes. Later on, if you've got a team of salespeople and you've got like a sales manager and you've got a whole bunch of account executives and then you could try hiring different people, right? You can try hiring for people that you wouldn't necessarily buy from, because maybe now you're targeting different markets or you've got specialization. But in the beginning, it has to be somebody that you would buy from, because they're the next step from founder sales to someone else selling. And there has to be alignment there. It can't be someone who's just like a completely left field candidate that's completely different from, that has a whole other different way of selling that, that you wouldn't buy from. For us, this was an important thing. When we were interviewing, we really were looking for people who had business to business, software as a service, subscription sales experience, selling something similar, similar deal sizes, similar sales cycles. And again, it's not going to be 10 out of 10 for everybody, right? But we really wanted someone who had done this before. And I think that was a mistake that we made earlier with some of our other experiments, or primarily with the contract hires, is that they didn't self-identify as salespeople. Like, we believed that they would be great at selling, but they weren't really salespeople. And so this time around, we knew we wanted to hire people who were salespeople. Like, if you look at their resume, if you talk to them about their career, if you ask them who they are, they were like, yes, I am a salesperson. This is what I do. And so that, it seems obvious, but that's really important. Some of the things that you can't get away from is, again, assessing their capacity for learning. You want somebody who can grow. Things are going to change, especially in a small business. It's very fluid. You need people who are interested in learning, people who are interested in getting constructive criticism and feedback, and improving the way they do things and changing things they do. And so you need people who are really open and humble for that type of communication. They don't need to have domain experience. So, for example, we use HubSpot. We were really looking for staff that had significant experience in HubSpot. And in the end, I don't think either of the candidates that we hired actually had experience in HubSpot. So again, it's not, you can never get 10 out of 10 on every item. And so they don't have to necessarily have the exact domain experience about your business, but industry experience is helpful. So both of our candidates are huge into travel. They both have lived around the world in other countries, lived and worked in other countries. One of the candidates has owned like tourism businesses. So for our market, those are the kinds of markets that we serve. We want employees who have passion for those things. So it's okay if they don't specifically know HubSpot, or they don't specifically know like our product, or specifically know about specific markets that we target, like zip lines or food tours or things like that. They can learn those things, but just that general industry experience is really, really important. And again, you want to be able to think about their potential when you're hiring. So things like curiosity, like, do they dig into things? Are they curious? And these, it doesn't have to be business curiosity. It needs to be just as part of their character, right? Are they curious about things? Are they engaged? Like, can they have an engaged conversation? Are they focused, right? Do they have determination, confidence, motivation? Those sort of basic character traits are really important, as well as emotional intelligence, right? You don't want to make a hiring decision based on like whether you want to grab a beer with someone, or whether they're nice. Those are okay, but those can be kind of superficial, and people can kind of slide by on those, right? In an interview, you can say, oh, this person would be great to have a beer with. But what you really want to try to gauge is their actual emotional intelligence, and the way that comes out in a conversation. It's not about sort of like the grab a beer type of emotional intelligence. It's about really picking up on whether they're good listeners, whether they reflect, mirror back what they're hearing, that type of stuff. So yeah, basically don't compromise on character. lots of other things can be overcome, but character flaws can't. So if there's anything, around like dishonesty or any sort of abusive qualities or lousy working habits, those are things that you won't be able to change. Like, you can teach people anything, but you're not going to be able to change someone that isn't fundamentally ethical. And for us at Fotaflo, that's like just one of the biggest things for us is ethics is at the bedrock of everything that we do. We actually had one candidate that I was interviewing tell me that when he was working in Bali, they were raided by the authorities because they were working illegally, and then they had to bribe the authorities in order to not be charged. He's telling me this in a job interview, right? I mean, it's an exciting story, but I'm not going to hire this person. I'm not looking for somebody who's at all interested in working illegally in other countries. I mean, depends on your business. Maybe that's part of what you have to do. I have heard and seen many things in my career, but I'm not hiring this person for my business. And so, yeah, so those are a bunch of things. The next few slides are eye charts. I'm not going to go through them in detail because we're getting close to the 11 o'clock, but when we were hiring, we did our usual thing. We documented everything. We wrote down a process that we were going to follow. We did research on questions we were going to ask. We wrote those down. I put a bunch of them into a spreadsheet. I put all the candidates' names with room for comments. And so these are a bunch of questions that we sort of divided up into 3 areas. So the personal side, like, why do they do what they do? What are their passions? What are their interests? Like, what gets them out of bed? The personal sort of qualities and traits that we want to probe and understand, right? What do they enjoy? What are they reading? Reading is critical. You want, again, this is from our perspective, it might be different elsewhere, but we want people who are engaged in improving themselves and in learning. For us, we want to know if they're interested in travel and adventure. Are they interested in food and meeting people? Things like zip lines and whitewater rafting and, traveling around the world to all these cool places. That's a big part of what we do. The next section we looked at is sort of generic professional traits. So like, how do they work on teamwork? Are they used to project work, independent work? It doesn't have to be sales related, but just how are they to work with? How do they work? What are some of their experiences around just dealing with the things that happen in business, right? Disappointment, rejection. In the past, did they work in like a sales boiler room where they were making 100 phone calls a day, or was it outside sales where they were traveling around? Are they used to being an individual contributor, or were they a sales manager before? There's pros and cons, talk about that. And in this, we also were evaluating their online meeting capabilities because we're a fully remote company, and obviously kind of everybody is right now. So, how do they present in the meeting? So I had like one of the candidates that showed up for an online interview, they didn't turn their camera on, right? So, I mean, you're not going to get the job working in a remote company if you're not going to go to your interview and have the video on. So we're looking at like, are they professional? Are they, when they come to the online meeting, because all of our interviews were online, what does the room look like? Do they have a good camera? Do they have a decent microphone? Can they speak well enough and communicate in an online medium? What's their body language look like? Because this is how we work. I mean, we do online meetings. This is what we do. And you're going to be meeting people from around the world this way. This is a big part of your job. So doing those interviews online was actually really helpful because it basically helped us to evaluate that. Similarly, like I'll talk about it actually in a couple slides, some of our other experiences. So then we move on to some of the sort of technical things, like what do they know? Do they know HubSpot? Like what's their research process? What are questions that they ask? How do they handle, different situations, related to the technical aspects of what you're actually selling? The first 2 items on here actually were really, really helpful for me in those interviews. So actually, so the first one says prior to the first interview. We actually did this prior to the second interview, and I'll talk about our process in just a couple of seconds. So before their second interview, when I invited people to the second interview, I said, please identify 4 businesses that you think would be good potential customers. That proved to be really, really helpful. That really will make it clear if they understand your value proposition and if they understand who is going to benefit from what you do as a business. Like that was a really helpful one. And the second one I asked in the first interview, which is just tell me, like, again, they've only looked at our website, you know, they've probably done some Googling and some little online stalking, but based on what they know about Fotaflo so far, like how do we provide value? Like what is the value of Fotaflo to our customers? And that was a great, that one really uncovered, you know, people who really just didn't get it, you know, versus the people who had looked at our website and looked at a lot of parts of our website, and we've got a ton of material available. And so some people you could tell had really read it. They had engaged in that content, and they really understood what we were trying to do. So those were 2 great questions about that. I'm just going to skip a slide. So this is our process. This is what we did. So on a Friday, so prior to this, we had a job description. So make sure you've got a great job description that covers as much as you can about, you know, what the company is, what the vision, the mission, you know, what the duties they're going to need to do are, but also what kind of person you're looking for. What are the benefits of working for you? Lay it all out. I really highly advise putting the pay in there, you know, even if it's a range. So we had that job posting ready. We sent it out to any of our contacts who might be referrals. So like people at Innovation Factory, other advisors saying, here's a job posting, you know, we're looking for people. And then we also posted it online. So we used Indeed.com. There are a whole bunch of other things out there. Indeed worked well for us. So we posted those on a Friday with a 2-week deadline. So starting on that Friday through the next 2 weeks, we were receiving applicants. And then as they were coming in, we were triaging them. I'll just show this next. So we spent $210 on Indeed. We got 462 views. We got 56 applicants. Out of those 56, we scheduled 14 first interviews. And so you can see the 4 first interviews on that Thursday. So I started scheduling first interviews even before the deadline was up, because we knew that these people were people that we wanted to interview. So I did all those first interviews, scheduled 14 of them, Thursday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. 3 of them were no-shows. Some of them were late. One person emailed me the day after saying, oh, I thought the interview was on Thursday and not Wednesday. So, or Wednesday instead of Tuesday. So I can't remember, there were about 10 actual interviews. Out of those, again, trying to keep track in a spreadsheet. We also tried to record as many of those as we could so that my team members could also review the interviews. Out of those, we scheduled 4 second interviews. So those started on the Tuesday and, the Monday and Tuesday. And then out of those 4 second interviews, we actually scheduled 4 third interviews. So this is our process. I really recommend multiple interviews. It can seem like a lot to do, but it's really, really worth it. Hiring is such a critical thing. You want to be careful about hiring. And I believe multiple interviews with multiple people, and then debriefing after each interview, writing your notes about every interview right after the interview. Just take it seriously and make it a professional experience, even if you are just a one person show, or even if you've only got a few people. And we also engaged outside advisors. So for the third interview, we had an outside advisor that we work with do those interviews. That was just an awesome value add, right? Make sure that we're not out to lunch, because we're so internal. We're so much inside. And then so that was what? So 1, 2, 3, on the third Friday, we made a hiring decision, made 2 offers, and 2 of them accepted, and they started the following Friday. And so I can't think of really a more efficient and effective hiring process. It went super well, and I think we can repeat this again. You do have to be prepared to dedicate the hours to it, you know, like just scheduling these interviews, responding to the people who didn't make it, you know, back and forth scheduling, things like that. This was most of my time for most of these days, as well as prepping for the people that we did offer to come in, you know, paperwork for them, contracts. So you do need to be prepared to spend a fair bit of time, and that can be one of the challenges for a lot of companies. Like, this did take me away from other things that I would normally have been doing. Use tools, again, it's really important. Use things like HubSpot. So HubSpot lets us send out like meeting links so they can book in our calendar. You don't have to go back and forth like, hey, is this time good? Is that time good? You just send them a link. So like Calendly will do the same thing. Make sure you're using things like Google Meet or Zoom. Make it really simple and easy to execute the interviews, and you'll be able to churn through them quick. Like, there were days like that Friday where I did 5 interviews, right? And you can get through them, use the tools to make it easy. And so this is what we have now. So we hired 2 account executives. They're now doing sales. Ryan is also still going to be doing sales, but that's only until these 2 hires get ramped up. We do have our customer success manager doing those other things that I had mentioned before. And now it's really the goal for Ryan, who used to do almost all our sales, as well as myself, to transition to more of a coaching role, right? What you want to be careful of is, once you have salespeople who are selling, you want the founder to not keep doing sales, right? You have to sort of try to extract yourself from that. And so our current status, so they've been 1 month in role. The first 2 weeks of that, again, I dedicated 2 full weeks of my time to making sure that they got the training that they needed. I didn't do all the training. I had them meet with Ryan and Haley and Martin, our systems architect, for various training, technical training, processes training, you know, sales training, all like Fotaflo, just all the stuff that we do, tools training, for 2 weeks. I told them, don't do anything related to trying to sell, just focus on learning. And then we moved to daily coaching, specifically about deals they're working on, leads that they're working on. Are they, you know, do they need help with specific objection handling and so on? And then weekly one-on-ones. And then, so this chart here, this is the last 2 weeks. This is from HubSpot that shows the activity. So the top 2 are our new salespeople. And so you can see over the last 2 weeks, they've each completed you know, around 230 tasks. So that's between emails, tasks in HubSpot, phone calls, notes on you know, in the CRM, meetings. And so, you know, given that they've been in the role for a month, they had 2 weeks of training, and then in the 2 weeks since, they're each executing somewhere around 230 activities, you know, over the course of those 2 weeks. You can start to see that there's an indication here that there's performance to follow, right? They're working independently. They're using the tools that we need them to use. They're speaking the language we need them to speak. They understand how to find the leads in our CRM they need to find. They're booking meetings. You know, so it's, all indications are very positive. It's still somewhat early, but it seems to all be coming together, and it's a vastly different experience than what we had previously. And that takes me to the end. Only 3 minutes over.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much, Chad. So does anyone have any questions? Either put your hand up or feel free to unmute yourself. Go ahead if anyone has any questions at all. The floor is now open. Perfect. Angela, did you have a question?
Happy to chat with anybody who's here now who has any specific questions or feedback. My email address is chad@fotaflo.com. I think it was up there for a second. Email me directly if you like to. Find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Okay. So I have a question from Jennifer McCann. She's, I'm looking at hiring a salesperson on a commission basis. Has experience in the industry. Is that advisable, and what rate is appropriate?
Good question. I'm trying to think back to, so what we've done. So there's, sorry, I'm going to try to think of, because I'm not actually a sales manager expert, I tend to Google lots of things. The compensation model that we built out is a $50,000 base salary, and then 12.5% of annual contract value up to a certain threshold, and then that goes up a little bit. And so the couple of things that I came across when I was building that model. So one is, what is the overall target compensation? So what is the amount that you think this person needs to make in order to be satisfied? So if you know that their target is, so for us, our on target compensation, I think was 90,000 a year. So that's what we came up with. That's what we said for the type of salesperson we're looking for with the experience that we want. We believe that $90,000 a year total compensation is appropriate. I mean, you can get salespeople that make multiple hundreds of thousands a year, so there's such a range. But we said we want them to be able to make 90,000. And then I kind of worked backwards from that and said, okay, for them to make 90,000, their base is 50. So for them to make 40 in commission, based on what I know Ryan can sell, this many deals a month with this average value, this much revenue, you know, this is the percent that I'd have to pay commission for those salespeople to hit their target of 90,000, doing what we think is sort of normal, just kind of like the baseline sales performance. And then above that, then we added some extra levels, right? So if they can do better than Ryan did, then they make more money. So that's how we worked it. And then you could do the same thing, even if it's pure commission. It's basically the same question is, you know, how much do they want to make? And then how much would they need to sell and what percent commission in order to make that amount? And then you have to work on those last two, is to understand how much they need to sell in the commission. You have to kind of play with the numbers to figure out, like, is it reasonable, right? So it took me a while to work on this model. Like I spent kind of a few hours on it, I would say, altogether, just changing the percentages and trying to figure out, because for example, if they want to make 90,000 in pure commission, and that requires them to sell 18 million in revenue, like obviously that doesn't work, right? So it depends on your deal size. It depends on how many deals you think they can close, and it depends on the percent that you're going to pay them. But that's how I would go about it, I think. Hopefully that gives you a kind of a framework. You're going to have to plug the numbers in to kind of to see what that means for you. And that's why some of the stuff that I presented was about things that you should probably know before you start to hire. So we had really good information, because we're now subscription sales. We have really good information on like average, like the average revenue per customer per month, you know, average annual contract value, you know, average deal size. We had really kind of good information because we had sold enough subscriptions that we knew that. And we also knew that Ryan, you know, even though he's a co-founder, so he's obviously doing a ton of other things, we knew that Ryan on average was closing 4 to 5 deals a month. And so we just went on an achievable assumption that if we hire a full-time salesperson, they should be able to at least do that, right? Like if they can't, then there's something wrong. But if Ryan can close 4 or 5 average sized deals a month, then let's assume that the new staff can do that. And then again, work on those percentages to see how that nets out for total compensation until you get to some levels that make sense. And it did take quite a while of fiddling with different levels because we did add a couple tiers and we were working on the percentages, but I think that's what you have to do. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chad. This was actually an amazing session. I will include Chad's email and the follow-up email as well in case you do want to reach out to him regarding any more questions. We appreciate your talk today so much. It was so informative. If anyone wants to hang on and have a quick chat with Shannon, please do so. I see that some people did hang on. I know we're a little bit past the time, but I think it was well worth it. So Shannon, we'll stay on for a few minutes in case anyone does have any questions. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Chad.
Thanks everybody for sticking around.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.